This month's Art Spark, the journaling prompt is, what are you uncovering for yourself? So I was thinking about what could I do as a background technique that would kind of suggest layers so that there's uncovering and discovering discovering what those layers are. So there's a rubber stamping technique that I enjoy called second generation stamping. And what you'll need is you'll need some type of rubber stamp. I'm going to use these butterflies and moths. I guess they're all moths. This collection from Tim Holtz. So I'm going to be using that. And these are, they're foam stamps, but they'll stick to an acrylic block. So I'll be able to pop one of the stamps out and stick it onto the acrylic block and then stamp my paper with it. The other thing I'm using, there are these distress inks that I have multiple colors. For this first page, we're just going to use one color. I want to keep it easy. But so I'm going to use one of these ink colors here and do this second generation technique. So you're going to need some kind of stamp. If it needs an acrylic block, then you can grab that. You'll need your art journal and whatever ink you're going to use. It does not have to be these distress inks. I just happen to have them in these a lot of colors, and so I grabbed it because it's so pretty. So let's do that. So I'm going to pick my stamp and pull it out of this packaging, and then I'll put it on my block. All right, I've got my rubber stamp mounted onto my acrylic block, and for this technique, the second generation technique, it will show up with the highest contrast if you use an ink color that's already dark to begin with. So I'm going for this purple one because I know that this is it's like a medium value ink pad, and that way the second generation, you'll be able to see it. It won't be so faint that it's hard to see. If I had chosen this yellow one, for example, this would be great for my first stamp impression, but then when I go to do the second generation, it will be harder to see. And for this purposes, because I'm filming it and I want you to be able to see the contrast between the first generation stamping and the second generation stamping, I'm going to go with a bolder ink color. So this is why I'm choosing this one right now. You don't have to use this. I'm just doing it so that it will be higher contrast on this page and show up better on the video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ink up my stamp just like you normally would. And we'll see if I got some good coverage on there. When I stamp my stamps on whatever the surface is, if I'm going to repeatedly stamp on a surface, often I like to go off the edge, have my image go off the edge on at least 3 sides of my surface. So in this case, I have an art journal page. So I would, this will be hard for me to stamp here because of the coil. So I'll go off these 3 edges, and I'll show you that in a minute. But first, let me show you what I mean by the second generation stamping. Now, I've been talking for a bit, and this ink may have dried a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and reapply my ink just so that I know that I've got a good juicy layer, because I paused for a minute to talk about stamping off the edge. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna pick somewhere not off the edge this time, just to show you this technique. So you stamp the first time, and then I'm going to bring this stamp up to my face, so you're not going to be able to see that on the video, and I'm gonna huff like this on this rubber stamp, and the warmth and the moisture in my breath is going to reactivate the ink that's left on this stamp. So you're not going to see this, but you'll hear me. So I've done that, and now I'm going to come back and just slightly offset, stamp again. So we've got the original impression, which is this darker purple, and then the lighter impression, which is the second generation, because I stamped it again without re-inking. I huffed on it, and the warmth and moisture from my breath activated the residue ink so I could get a nice impression on my page. Sometimes, depending on the darkness of your original ink, you could do this again and get a third generation without having to re-stamp. Now, my stamp has been sitting here for a bit while I talk, so I don't know if I'll be able to get that, but let's try and see. Let's experiment. And then I'm going to go just off and see if I can get, oh, okay, I got a little bit of one right there, okay? So it's interesting when these are slightly overlapping this way, it almost suggests movement with this butterfly, right? So that's fun. So I actually got 3 generations because this ink was a fairly dark, medium to dark value ink. So I was able to get 3 separate impressions. So I'm going to continue with this second generation. You do not have to overlap your rubber stamp images. So let me show you what that looks like if I don't overlap, okay? So let me do my first. Ink this up. And stamp again. And now I'm going to huff. And I'm going to stamp somewhere else. So that time I did not overlap on top of each other. I just have 2 separate images. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to huff again, and I'm going to try stamping off the edge of my paper. So for my third generation. And let's go this way. Okay. Now, why do I like stamping off the edge? When you stamp a design off the edge, when you're going to have an all over pattern and you stamp off the edge, now your pattern doesn't look like it's floating on your art journal page or your card blank or whatever it is you're stamping on. If you've got everything, lined up so there's no overlapping on this edge, they tend to look like they're floating to me and that they need grounding. So for me, going off the edge like this grounds this design. Now, one thing I do not do is I don't do my first generation stamping off the edge and then huff and re-stamp, because you're going to get a line on this rubber stamp. If you go off the edge, now there's going to be a line where part of the stamp, part of the ink got stamped on this paper, but part of the ink did not. And if I then make a second generation of that print, there's going to be a dividing line where there's full ink and there's second generation ink on that next image. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me ink this up and I'll go off the edge and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, first generation is going to go off the edge. There we go. Now I'm going to huff. I'm not re-inking. Can you see? This is full ink. See how much darker that is than here? I huffed, and now I'm going to come and stamp again. Okay, do you see that? Because this ink here, when I went off the edge, this is the part of the stamp that did not get stamped on the paper. So that first layer of ink is still on there. And then when I huff, I get, this is light, that's from this part of the stamp. Does that make sense? So I don't tend to do the first generation off the edge and immediately try to do a second generation. If I was going to do that, I would do the first generation off the edge, I would re-stamp, and I would treat it as if I'm doing a first generation again. Okay? All right, I'm going to put, so I'm going to put more ink on here because I still have a dividing line of ink on that stamp. Okay, here comes my first generation. We'll go there, and I'm going to huff. My second generation, Goes there. I'm going to huff. My third generation goes there. Okay. Now let's do another one where I spread out my first and my second generation. Okay, let's see. Let's do, I've got an open spot here. Let's do one here, and then let's do huff and a second generation coming off the edge. Okay, now I'm not going to do a third generation because this will half and half with the ink again because I went off the edge. Alrighty. First generation, huffed on it. Second generation, huffed on it. Third generation. Okay, so look at that. Beautiful art journal background right there. Fairly simple. All right, so this page is ready for me to put my journaling on. And one of my favorite ways to journal whenever I have a butterfly symbol is I like to find a word in a book or magazine, and I'd like to cut that word out and then place it where the body of that butterfly would go. So here's one example where I've done that. And then I have this little tag. This is another example. This time the word is going across the body of the butterfly. So this is one of my favorite ways of putting journaling in. And since I have all these butterflies, that's what I'm going to do. So I have a book here. This one is Inspiration by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I'm going to flip through. And as you can see, I've already cut words out of this book, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a few moments and I'm going to flip through and I'm going to find some words that help me journal with the journaling prompt. What are you uncovering for yourself? So I'm just reminding myself of what that journaling prompt was. What am I uncovering? And again, I had the multi-layer butterflies as the idea that there's something underneath, right? That's peeking through and getting uncovered. So I'm gonna flip through. I'm gonna find some words. I don't know if I will find words for every single butterfly. I'll just play it by ear and see what words call to me. And when I have those cut out, I will come back. I'm not going to make you watch me go through this book and cut out words. So I'll cut out a pile of words and then I'll come back and glue the words on to finish my art journal page. All right, I have gone through and I've cut a bunch of words and I just randomly put them on these little moths. And so now I'll go ahead and glue these down. I like this way of journaling because I'm very much a visual journaler, meaning that I like these visual images that I then put meaning into. And when I create my pages, I'm sort of embedding my meaning into these pages as I create them. And, you know, sometimes writing on a page, a journal page, and then knowing people might see it, you feel a little vulnerable. You could feel a little exposed. Maybe you don't want people to be able to fully understand what your inner wisdom is telling you through your journaling. So this is, I like the way that there's just words because people can interpret words different ways. And they're not going to know, you're not, you know, explicitly saying all the feelings, right? And I find that when my journaling can be, I call it being disguised, because it's not right out there for everyone to read and know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about, but it's not explicit for everyone else to know. So then I feel more comfortable putting down things that are a little more raw and vulnerable because they're not quite as obvious. So this is one way you can disguise your journaling, is by just using words that you've cut out of a book that represent what your written journaling would say. And if you want to journal like in a notebook or something like that, and then this is like your reference, your visual reference symbology page, that works too. For me, this is enough. This is enough.